My name is Nathaniel Caldwell, and I am a 52-year-old genomic researcher from Helensburgh, Scotland. Before the day that altered my life forever, I was convinced that everything was going exactly as it should. My career at the University of Aberdeen was flourishing. I was at the forefront of genetic engineering research, making strides in the field of CRISPR technology. I lived with my partner, Damien, in a magnificent Edwardian home that overlooked the serene waters of Loch Lomond, and we had been eagerly planning our summer wedding. I had never been a religious person. In fact, I prided myself on my unwavering commitment to reason and scientific evidence. Whenever I encountered religious individuals, I dismissed their faith as outdated superstition. My parents, though nominal Christians, only attended church services on Christmas and Easter, a tradition I completely abandoned upon leaving for university. The day my life took an irreversible turn began like any other. I was finalizing preparations for a major presentation on my latest CRISPR research, which I was scheduled to deliver at an esteemed conference in London. The night before, I had stayed late at the lab, meticulously reviewing my findings to ensure everything was in perfect order. That morning, as I entered the laboratory, an unusual scent hung in the air, a pungent, chemical odor that I couldn't quite place. I should have been more cautious and should have given it more attention, but my mind was preoccupied with my work. The building's ventilation system had been malfunctioning for weeks, yet maintenance had continuously delayed repairs. As I worked with several volatile compounds, I started feeling unsteady. My head swam, and the room seemed to tilt slightly. I brushed it off, attributing it to exhaustion and an overconsumption of caffeine. That was my first mistake. My second was ignoring the progressively stronger chemical smell. I glanced at my phone and saw a message from Damien about our dinner plans that evening. I began typing a reply, but an odd numbness spread through my fingers, and my vision blurred. It was at that moment that I understood something was wrong. I tried to reach the emergency shower, but my legs felt like they were no longer my own. The room spun violently, and before I could brace myself, I collapsed against a shelf of hazardous chemicals. Glass shattered around me. The last thing I recall was an unbearable burning sensation as the spilled chemicals reacted upon contact with my skin, producing toxic fumes that choked the air around me. My body screamed in pain as my lab coat burned away, exposing my blistering flesh to the lethal mixture. My throat constricted as the poisonous vapors filled my lungs. The emergency lights flickered in response to the lab's alarm, but the sound of it was distant, as though I were already slipping away. My thoughts drifted to Damien. We planned to visit Berlin the following month. The ring is hidden in my desk drawer at home, waiting for the perfect moment to propose. As I lay on the cold laboratory floor, those dreams felt like remnants of another life. My colleagues found me minutes later, though it felt like an eternity. Dr. Sarah Chen, my trusted research assistant, was the first to reach my side. Though my swollen eyes barely registered her face, I heard her voice, urgent and distressed, calling for help. Moments later, the hazmat team arrived, followed swiftly by paramedics. They worked quickly, but I could feel myself slipping further into oblivion. The ambulance ride to the University Medical Center was a blur of flashing lights and fragmented voices. Medical terms floated through the haze: severe chemical burns, respiratory failure, and cardiac arrest imminent. I felt hands cutting away the remnants of my clothing, needles puncturing my skin as they inserted 4 lines. The excruciating pain dulled into a distant ache, giving way to an eerie numbness. Damien arrived at the hospital just as they wheeled me into emergency surgery. His voice, thick with anguish, reached my ears, but I was unable to respond. The doctors later told me that over 40% of my body had suffered third-degree burns. My lungs were ravaged by the toxic fumes, and my heart had stopped twice in the ambulance. Reflecting now, I realize how arrogant I had been, placing unwavering faith in science alone. I had dismissed anything that could not be measured, tested, or published in a peer-reviewed journal. My genetics research reinforced my belief that human existence was merely a sophisticated arrangement of molecules, that consciousness, love, and even the soul were simply the byproducts of biochemical reactions. My academic work frequently challenged traditional beliefs, advocating for random evolution over intelligent design. I had given countless lectures where I scoffed at near-death experiences, explaining them away as hallucinations caused by the dying brain. How ironic that I was about to experience one myself. The final thing I remember, before everything faded to black, was the sound of medical monitors beeping in an increasingly slow rhythm. A doctor was shouting orders about my rapidly declining blood pressure. A nurse readied the defibrillator. Damien was being pulled away, his face streaked with tears. Then, my heart stopped. It was August 17, 2023, at precisely 2:46 a.m. when I was declared clinically dead. At that moment, everything changed. It was not like falling asleep or slipping into unconsciousness. It was as though I had awoken from the longest dream of my life. The pain that had once consumed me vanished in an instant, and I felt myself floating above my own body. Below, the chaos of the hospital room unfolded like a scene from a television drama. Doctors frantically attempting to revive me, hands performing chest compressions, the electric jolt of the defibrillator. But I felt no fear. Instead, an overwhelming sense of tranquility washed over me. My awareness expanded beyond the confines of the hospital, beyond the limitations of my physical existence. All the theories I had once held dear, all the beliefs I had mocked, suddenly seemed woefully inadequate to explain what was happening to me. If you are not subscribed, I recommend subscribing and activating the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Then it happened. A presence so vast, so overwhelmingly real, that I felt as if my very soul had been exposed to a force beyond comprehension. It was not just an energy, not a mere sensation, but a person. A presence is both infinitely loving and terrifyingly holy. I knew, in the deepest core of my being, that this was Jesus Christ. Not a historical figure confined to ancient texts. Not a distant religious symbol. But the living God, standing before me with undeniable authority and indescribable love. My heart pounded as his presence wrapped around me, drowning out all doubt, all pretense. It was like being laid bare before the purest light, a radiance that burned away every illusion I had ever clung to. "Marcellus," he spoke, not with words, but directly into my soul. His voice resonated with absolute truth, shattering every intellectual barrier I had erected over the years. "You sought truth through science, but you missed the greatest truth of all." His words cut through me, gentle yet piercing, comforting yet convicting. I had spent my life worshiping knowledge, trusting in human reason, convinced that science held the keys to the mysteries of existence. I had laughed at the idea of intelligent design and dismissed faith as an emotional crutch. But now, in his presence, every theory I had constructed crumbled like dust. "My child," he continued, his eyes holding both sorrow and unfathomable compassion, "you studied the complexity of DNA, yet failed to see the signature of your creator. You mapped genomes but overlooked the divine blueprint. You taught others that life was a cosmic accident, while I knit each person together in their mother's womb." A wave of anguish crashed over me. How could I have been so blind? The elegant precision of molecular machinery, the seamless interplay of biological systems, things I had once attributed to random chance, now revealed themselves as divine craftsmanship. I wanted to protest, to defend my work, my research, and my countless publications that had been praised by the scientific community. But in the face of this truth, my arguments were nothing. They were dust in the wind. Then he showed me something that made my breath catch in my throat. Souls. Endless souls lost in torment. People who had rejected him, clinging to their versions of truth. Some were scholars, scientists, and intellectuals I had admired. Some had even been my mentors. I saw professors who had once stood at lecterns with confidence, preaching the gospel of secularism. Now, their wisdom meant nothing. Their achievements, their accolades, all the theories they had once championed, they had no value here. "This is not what I desire for any soul," Jesus said, his voice filled with sorrow deeper than I could bear. "I died to save humanity, but each person must choose to accept this gift. Your influence has led many to reject me." My stomach twisted as he revealed the impact of my life's work, not just my teachings in science, but my personal choices as well. He showed me how my public embrace of the gay lifestyle had influenced others, especially young minds searching for identity. I saw students, inspired by my words and actions, walking paths that led them further from God's design. What I had once celebrated as freedom was, in reality, a distortion of his perfect plan. The weight of responsibility was unbearable. "But I love you, Marcellus," Jesus continued, his gaze piercing through my anguish. "Even in your rejection of me, I never stopped loving you. It is not too late to choose differently." Then, he gave me a glimpse of heaven, not the dull, cloud-filled paradise I had once mocked, but a realm bursting with vibrant life, learning, and purpose. I saw scientists there, brilliant minds now unshackled by earthly pride, exploring the wonders of the universe with a full understanding of its creator. The joy on their faces was indescribable. Every discovery was worship. Every revelation was an act of awe and gratitude. "In my Father's house are many mansions," Jesus said. "There is a place for those who seek truth, but true science never contradicts divine truth. It reveals my glory." He then showed me how my work, though intellectually impressive, had been wielded as a weapon against the truth. Every lecture in which I had confidently declared that science disproved God's existence, and every article in which I ridiculed faith, had repercussions that echoed beyond the academic world. It wasn't just theory, it had real, eternal consequences. "Look," he said, and I saw a young student who had once held onto faith, but after taking my class, had abandoned it completely. I saw how his loss of belief had caused a ripple effect, influencing others to reject God. The chain reaction was horrifying. Then, Jesus showed me something that shattered my heart, the true nature of love. The love I had believed in, the love I had defended in my relationship with Damien, was not what I thought it was. It was a shadow of the real thing. He revealed how genuine love always aligns with his will and his created order. "I created marriage as a sacred union between man and woman," he explained. "It reflects my relationship with my church. Any deviation from this pattern leads souls away from me." I saw, in an instant, how my advocacy had misled so many. Not out of malice, but out of ignorance. I had championed something I thought was about love, yet I had unknowingly pushed people further from the very source of love itself. This wasn't about hate. It wasn't about discrimination. It was about eternal truth and the nature of divine love. "Your influence extends beyond your scientific work," Jesus continued. "You have encouraged others to reject my design for human sexuality and relationships. This has caused many to stumble. All my arguments about genetic predisposition, natural variation, and personal freedom felt hollow in the face of his words. True freedom, I realized, was not in living however we pleased, but in aligning with the purpose for which we were created." Then, the final revelation struck like lightning. All paths that denied his deity, all ideologies that sought to merge or dilute his message, were leading souls to destruction. The interfaith dialogues I once praised as enlightened were now revealed as dangerous deceptions. "I am the way, the truth, and the life," he declared. "No one comes to the Father except through me." I saw other religions, their leaders, and their teachings, many noble in human eyes, yet all falling short of salvation. I saw Muhammad, whom I had once respected, now revealed as someone who had led countless souls away from the truth. I saw the Eastern philosophies I had dabbled in, their wisdom turning to dust in the face of Christ's unshakable reality. Then he showed me hell. The torment, the agony, the absolute horror of separation from God. This was not just punishment. It was the terrifying, eternal consequence of rejecting love itself. These weren't just nameless figures. They were real people, people who had made wrong choices, people who had believed lies and turned away from the truth. And in that moment, I knew. I had a choice. The time for pride was over. The time for excuses was gone. The only question that remained was, would I surrender? "This is why I came," Jesus said, his voice filled with a profound mix of authority and tender compassion. "This is why I endured the suffering and death that no one could truly understand. Every soul is precious to me, but they must choose to accept my sacrifice, to follow my path, and to live according to the truth I offer." The weight of his words hit me like a storm. Then he showed me something that brought me to my knees, though I had no physical form to fall upon. He revealed how my life's work, my passion, my research, my pursuit of scientific knowledge, if redirected, could have been an instrument of divine glory. The realization was so overwhelming that it shattered my heart. My discoveries, which I had once believed to be pillars of rationality, could have been stepping stones leading people to the faith, pointing them toward a God who designed everything in perfect harmony. Instead, I had inadvertently led others away from him. I saw an alternate reality, a timeline where my work illuminated the intricate, beautiful fingerprints of God in creation. I saw students in awe of his wisdom, marveling at the complexity of life, embracing the existence of a creator rather than doubting his presence. "Science was meant to reveal my glory," he said, his voice filled with both sorrow and grace. "The patterns in genetics, the precision of molecular biology, the laws that govern the universe, they are my fingerprints, my design. True science will always point to me." The love that radiated from Jesus overwhelmed me. It wasn't a permissive, indifferent love, the kind I had once naively embraced, where anything goes and everyone is free to do whatever they desire. No. This was perfect love, a holy love, pure and unwavering, rooted in absolute truth. A love that desires the best for every soul, even if that means confronting uncomfortable, painful truths that would challenge everything I thought I knew. "You have a choice now, Marcellus," he said gently, yet with a firm resolve. "You can return and use your gifts to lead people to me, or you can continue down the path you're on. But remember what you've seen here. Remember the eternal consequences of your choices." At that moment, I understood. My entire worldview had been built on shifting, fragile sand. The accolades, the recognition, the accolades I had once cherished, none of it mattered. What truly mattered were the eternal truths that stood before me, unwavering and unchanging. Every soul is eternal, and what we do with the truth of Jesus Christ determines our eternal destiny. "Your scientific mind was a gift from me," Jesus continued, his voice softening with compassion, but carrying the weight of truth. "But like all gifts, it was meant to serve my glory, not to lead people astray, away from the truth." Then, Jesus took me to the early church, to the apostles who had laid down their lives in defense of the resurrection, in defense of the truth that had changed the world. These weren't myths or legends like I had once dismissed them to be. No, these were real people, historical figures who had suffered for the truth. I saw how the true church had fought to preserve his teachings, to keep his message alive, even amid unimaginable persecution. "The faith once delivered to the saints remains unchanged," he said with deep reverence. He showed me how modern attempts to redefine his teachings, especially those on marriage and human sexuality, were dangerous deviations, lies that led people further from the eternal truth. And then, Jesus delivered a final blow to my intellectual pride. He revealed how many of my so-called groundbreaking scientific discoveries had been subtle revelations of divine truths that had been written in his word from the beginning. The codes I had studied in genetics, they were his language. The molecular machines I had dissected in awe, they were his divine engineering. "Science without me is like studying a painting while refusing to acknowledge the artist," he said. "You've been analyzing my brushstrokes, but refusing to recognize the painter." The weight of eternal reality came crashing down upon me. Suddenly, everything that had once seemed so important, the theories, the debates, the present-day focus on living in the moment, all felt so meaningless when juxtaposed with the infinite, eternal truth. "Your life is not your own," Jesus declared with a strength that left me breathless. "You were bought with a price. Your body is meant to be a temple of my Holy Spirit, not a vessel for sin." He then showed me something that struck me to my core. The sacraments, baptism, and communion, those sacred rites I had once dismissed as empty rituals, were, in fact, channels of divine grace. They weren't symbolic, they weren't mere traditions. No, they were how God's people connected with him and participated in his divine life. "These aren't just traditions," he said, his eyes full of love and urgency. "They are the very way my grace flows to my church." Then came the most earth-shattering part of the revelation. Jesus showed me how my rejection of traditional Christian sexual ethics, once touted as enlightened progress, was nothing more than a capitulation to the world's sinful pressures. It wasn't liberation, it was bondage. "I created humanity male and female," he said with deep sorrow in his voice. "This design is beautiful, perfect, and reflects deep spiritual truths. The world's attempt to blur these distinctions is an offense to my heart, and it causes harm to those made in my image." The revelation deepened, showing me how my scientific research, if seen through the lens of truth, could have supported the divine reality instead of undermining it. The complexity of DNA, the irreducible complexity of the cell, the fine-tuning of the physical universe, these were all signs pointing to intelligent design. "Your work could have revealed my glory," he said, his voice heavy with both sadness and hope. "Instead, you used it to promote theories that drove people away from me. But it's not too late, Marcellus. You can change course." And amid his unwavering love, there was a deep sadness. He showed me the faces of those who had been affected by my choices, young researchers who had followed my lead in skepticism, students who had lost their faith in the face of my arguments, and colleagues who had become more entrenched in atheism because of my influence. "Each soul is precious to me," Jesus said with aching tenderness. "I died for each one. When you lead them away from truth, you work against my purpose of salvation." The weight of the eternal reality was heavier than any burden I had ever carried. The truth was undeniable. I had failed, but in His mercy, He was allowing me to make it right. And in that moment, I knew that no matter what else I had achieved, it was only the truth of Christ that could save me, and all those I had influenced. Then, He revealed something that shattered the very foundation of my scientific understanding, something that struck my rational mind with undeniable force. He showed me the true nature of consciousness and the soul. In an instant, every materialistic explanation I had once clung to, every theory I had defended with such confidence, crumbled into dust. I had believed that human thought, emotions, and self-awareness were nothing more than the byproducts of neural activity, a sophisticated illusion generated by firing synapses. But now, I saw the truth with a clarity that burned away all doubt. The soul was real. Consciousness was not confined to the brain. It was something more, something eternal, something far beyond the realm of biochemical reactions. "You studied the brain but missed the soul," Jesus said, his words both piercing and mournful. "You mapped neural pathways but overlooked the spiritual dimension of human existence." The weight of my blindness crushed me. How could I have been so certain, so arrogantly dismissive of what countless believers had known for centuries? I had spent my life priding myself on knowledge, yet I had ignored the most profound truth of all, that we are not mere matter. We are souls, eternal beings created for a purpose. But the revelations did not stop there. Jesus turned my attention to another area where I had fought so fiercely against faith, the theory of evolution. I had spent years championing Darwinian evolution as the ultimate explanation for life, passionately arguing that all existence was the product of random, unguided processes. I had convinced students, colleagues, and even myself that human beings were accidents of nature and that our existence had no inherent meaning beyond what we chose to give it. Now, Jesus showed me the deep flaw in my thinking. He did not deny that natural processes existed. He had authored the laws of physics, biology, and chemistry. But the atheistic, purposeless evolution I had defended was a distortion of reality. "I am the Creator," he declared, and his words resonated through the very fabric of my being. "Whether through immediate action or guided processes, all life comes from me. There is purpose and design in creation." At that moment, I saw it. The elegance of genetic code, the irreducible complexity of biological structures, the fine-tuning of the universe. All of it pointed not to blind chance but to an intelligent mind. To Him. How had I missed this? How had I ignored the whispers of design embedded in every molecule, every cell, every law of nature? It was all there, staring me in the face, and yet I had refused to see. Then came the most sobering vision of all, a glimpse of the final judgment. I saw souls standing before the throne of God, giving an account of their lives. Among them were scientists, professors, and intellectuals, men and women who had used their gifts to lead others astray. I saw the weight of their influence stretching across generations, the ripple effect of their teachings. Students who had lost their faith because of a single lecture. Readers who had embraced atheism after absorbing their arguments. Generations were poisoned by the lie that God was unnecessary, and that faith was foolishness. "To whom much is given, much is required," Jesus said, his voice filled with sorrow. And then I saw myself among them. The horror of it was unbearable. My intellectual gifts had been entrusted to me for a reason, and I had squandered them. I had been given the ability to think, to discover, to explore the mysteries of the universe, not to reject God, but to glorify Him. And yet, instead of leading others to the truth, I had built my legacy on falsehoods. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Jesus then showed me another path. The path of those who had embraced both science and faith. I saw great minds throughout history. Newton, Pascal, Mendel, and so many others, who had made groundbreaking discoveries without abandoning their creator. They understood that all truth is my truth, Jesus said. They saw no conflict between faith and science because they recognized me as the author of both. But modern science, he revealed, had become something different. It had become its religion, complete with dogmas, high priests, and an unyielding intolerance toward those who questioned its assumptions. And I had been one of its most devoted evangelists. Your lectures became sermons for atheism, Jesus said, his words striking my heart like lightning. Your research papers became scriptures for materialism. You thought you were liberating minds, but you were enslaving souls to deception. I felt utterly broken. And then he showed me something that crushed me differently. Not with judgment, but with love. I saw the prayers of those who had never stopped interceding for me. My parents, whom I had mocked for their faith, kneeled in prayer for me night after night. Colleagues I had ridiculed, lifting my name before God, pleading for my soul. Strangers in church pews who had no reason to care for me, had prayed for me nonetheless. Tears burned in my eyes. How had I been so blind? Their prayers have been heard, Jesus said, his voice filled with tenderness. This moment is partly an answer to their faithful intercession. Then he showed me something I had never believed in: spiritual warfare. I had spent my career dismissing the idea of unseen forces, arrogantly reducing religious belief to psychological crutches and superstitions. But now, I saw the battle raging all around me. I saw how my work, my teachings, and my books had been used as weapons, not just in intellectual debates, but in a war I had refused to acknowledge. Dark forces had taken my words, my influence, and used them to erode faith, to plant seeds of doubt, to pull souls away from their Creator. There is more to reality than what your instruments can measure, Jesus said. The battle for souls is real, and you have been fighting on the wrong side. I couldn't speak. I could only weep. And yet, through all of it, through my failures, my arrogance, my blind devotion to a world without God, His love remained. I did not deserve it. I had done nothing to earn it. And yet, He stood before me, offering a choice. Then, Jesus revealed something that pierced my soul with unbearable weight: how my promotion of LGBTQ+ ideology had contributed to deep spiritual confusion among young people. I had believed I was fighting for love, for justice, for human rights. But now, in His presence, I saw the devastating truth. What I had seen as advocacy was, in reality, participation in a movement that, however well-intentioned, had led many away from God's design. True love speaks truth, Jesus said, his voice firm yet filled with sorrow. True compassion does not affirm people in paths that lead to destruction. I saw it all in an instant. The countless souls who had taken my words as permission to embrace identities that distanced them from their Creator. I had been so sure I was standing on the right side of history. Now, I realized with crushing clarity that I had been standing against eternal truth. I had mistaken cultural trends for moral progress, but Jesus showed me that real progress was not about reshaping truth to fit human desires. It was about aligning with divine reality. The biblical standards you dismissed as outdated, He said, are eternal principles designed for human flourishing. My commands are not burdensome. They are protective boundaries set by a loving Father. Tears burned in my eyes as I saw how my influence had extended far beyond what I had imagined. My research papers, cited in academic journals, reinforced a worldview that erased God from the picture. My public statements, widely shared on social media, had bolstered ideologies that encouraged people to define their truth rather than seek His. Every word, every action creates ripples in eternity, Jesus said. Nothing is truly private or without consequence. The weight of that statement crushed me. How many people had I unknowingly led astray? Then, He revealed something that shook me to my core: the reality of spiritual deception. I had always prided myself on being a critical thinker, a skeptic of dogma. But now, Jesus showed me how blind I had been. Many of the progressive Christian voices I had admired, those who tried to reconcile biblical truth with cultural trends, were not voices of wisdom but of confusion. "My word does not change to fit human preferences," Jesus declared. "Those who twist scripture to match cultural trends are false teachers." I saw how Christianity had always been countercultural, how the early Christians had chosen death rather than compromise. And yet, I had prided myself on making Christianity more palatable to the modern world, convincing myself that it was an act of love. But true love does not bend the truth to spare feelings. True love calls people into alignment with God's will, no matter how difficult or unpopular. "The cost of discipleship remains high," he said, "but the rewards are eternal." Then, the vision expanded. I saw truth, scientific, moral, and spiritual, not as separate spheres, but as one unified reality. My compartmentalized thinking had blinded me. I had believed that science operated independently of faith, that morality was subjective, and that spirituality was personal and flexible. But now, I saw that truth could not be divided against itself. "Your way of thinking led to spiritual blindness," Jesus said. "Truth is not a set of competing ideas. It is one whole, and it originates from me." Then he took me deeper still. He showed me my work in genetic engineering, research I had once been so proud of. I had been at the cutting edge of science, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But now, I saw the ethical lines I had crossed, the arrogance with which I had approached the manipulation of life itself. "Life is sacred," he declared. "Your work should have respected the boundaries I established." I had thought I was improving the human condition, but Jesus revealed how my fascination with genetic modification and transhumanism had contributed to a dangerous mindset, the belief that humans were nothing more than biological machines to be upgraded, rather than sacred beings created in God's image. "I designed humanity with purpose," he said. "Attempts to improve my design often reflect human pride rather than wisdom." Then came a revelation so profound that I could barely comprehend it. He showed me the nature of gender, not just as a biological reality, but as a spiritual truth woven into the fabric of creation itself. Male and female were not arbitrary categories, nor were they mere social constructs. They were reflections of divine mysteries, a sacred design meant to point to deeper truths about God's relationship with His people. "This is not about cultural norms," he explained. "It's about eternal design patterns written into creation itself." And then, my heart shattered completely. I saw how my public support for gender ideology had led so many young people further into confusion. I had thought I was offering them freedom, but in truth, I had been reinforcing a lie that kept them from finding their real identity in Christ. "True identity is found in me," Jesus said, his eyes full of love and sorrow, "not in fluid categories created by human wisdom." I could barely process what I was seeing. How many had been lost because I had encouraged them to seek their identity in shifting, unstable definitions rather than in the eternal, unchanging love of God? I had thought I was affirming them when in reality, I had been helping to chain them to a broken view of themselves. Finally, Jesus showed me the true nature of authority. I had spent my life placing my trust in academia, in peer-reviewed studies, in expert consensus. I had dismissed Scripture as outdated and rigid, trusting instead in human progress and intellectualism. But now, he spoke words that left me trembling. "Human knowledge changes constantly," he said. "My word endures forever." The words cut through me like a sword. I had been so sure of human wisdom, yet now I saw its fragility, its shifting sands. Entire fields of science had overturned their theories within decades, yet I had based my entire worldview on these fleeting ideas while rejecting the one truth that had never changed. I had built my life on sand. And now, standing before the one who is truth itself, I saw how foolish I had been. Then Jesus showed me something that struck the deepest chords of my soul, my relationship with Damien. I had defended it as love, believing it to be a pure expression of my identity. But now, standing in the presence of divine truth, I saw it for what it truly was, a substitute for the deeper spiritual intimacy I was meant to have with God. I created sexual intimacy for a specific context, Jesus explained. Outside that context, it becomes a counterfeit of true spiritual union. The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy fog, suffocating the narratives I had clung to for so long. The love Jesus showed me was overwhelming, but it wasn't the permissive, affirming love I had preached. This was perfect love, the kind that desires ultimate good, even when that means confronting sin and calling for repentance. True love doesn't affirm harmful choices, he said. It calls people to truth and transformation. Then he revealed something even more sobering. The modern church's attempt to be inclusive by compromising biblical truth was not love, but deception. Real inclusion means inviting people to repentance and transformation, not affirming them in destructive patterns, Jesus declared. My church must speak truth in love. Silence about sin is not love, it's indifference toward eternity. A new vision unfolded before me, shifting my perspective entirely. Jesus showed me the nature of time and eternity, how our brief, fleeting lives on earth determined our destinies beyond death. Every argument I had made about living authentically seemed foolish in the light of forever. 70 or 80 years, he said, versus eternity. And yet, humans trade eternal joy for temporary pleasure. Then I saw the true nature of the battle raging on earth, not a battle of politics or culture, but a war for souls. He revealed how my scientific work, divorced from divine truth, had unknowingly served forces opposing his kingdom. You thought you were fighting superstition, Jesus said, but you were fighting against truth itself. The academic world I had revered as the pinnacle of reason and progress was suddenly exposed. I saw how the peer review process, which I had trusted as an objective gatekeeper of truth, was often a tool to enforce a materialistic orthodoxy rather than pursue real discovery. Many of your colleagues are also trapped in this deception, Jesus said. They need someone to show them the way out. The vision then shifted again, revealing the devastating impact of sexual sin, not just on individuals, but on entire societies. What the world celebrated as freedom, I now saw as spiritual bondage. Sexual sin affects the soul deeply, Jesus explained. It creates chains that can only be broken through my power. I saw how my public defense of alternative lifestyles had given false hope to those struggling with unwanted attractions. Instead of pointing them to the transformation available in Christ, I encouraged them to embrace identities that distanced them from God's best. Many wanted to change, Jesus said, but your words convinced them that change was impossible and unnecessary. Then he struck at the core of my scientific pride. He showed me how my research conclusions had been subtly influenced by my spiritual blindness. I had always prided myself on objectivity, but now I saw how my rejection of God had caused me to interpret data through the lens of my atheistic worldview. True science, pursued honestly, always points to me, Jesus declared. But your bias prevented you from seeing what was there. The revelation deepened as he showed me the true purpose of human sexuality. The physical union of husband and wife was not just a biological function but a reflection of profound spiritual truths, an earthly symbol of Christ's love for his church. Marriage isn't just a social construct, Jesus explained. It's a living parable of my relationship with my people. Then he revealed something even more unsettling. The enemy had been strategically attacking this truth through cultural movements, ideologies, and redefinitions of identity. What appears as progress, Jesus said, is a coordinated assault on my design. The battle isn't against people. It's against powers and principalities that seek to destroy my image in humanity. The vision shifted again, returning to my work in genetic engineering. I believed I was pushing the boundaries of human progress, advancing medical science for the greater good. But now, Jesus showed me where I had crossed lines I never should have. Life is sacred from conception, he said. Your work with embryonic cells violated this sanctity. Then he humbled me to my core. He revealed the true impact of my academic influence, not just on my students, but on entire generations. My lectures, my research, and my publications formed the intellectual foundation for young minds who would go on to teach others. The influence of a teacher extends through time, Jesus said. Your words have shaped more souls than you know. And now, in the undeniable presence of truth, I saw what I had done. I had spent my life building an empire of knowledge, but I had ignored the one thing that mattered most, the eternal destiny of my soul and the souls I had influenced. Yet, even in the face of my failures, Jesus still stood before me, not with condemnation, but with an offer. An offer of redemption, of grace, of a chance to turn back. Jesus showed me scenes from my lectures, those lectures where I had so confidently mocked intelligent design and creationism, dismissing them as foolish and unscientific. I saw the faces of Christian students sitting in the classroom, their hearts struggling with the tension between their faith and my arguments. I could almost hear the whispers of doubt creeping into their minds. Some of them had abandoned their beliefs entirely. They trusted you as an authority, Jesus said softly, but you led them away from the highest truth. The weight of those words crushed me. I had once believed I was enlightening them, but now I saw I was a stumbling block. The vision shifted, and I saw the reality of spiritual warfare playing out in academia. I saw how dark forces had strategically placed professors like me in positions of influence, subtly pushing young minds further from faith. Universities, once meant to glorify God, had become bastions of opposition to His truth. I created these institutions to honor me, Jesus said, but now many have become strongholds for the forces of darkness. My words, my scientific credentials, which had carried so much weight, were used against the very faith I had once claimed to understand. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Your voice carried authority, he explained, but you used that authority to oppose my word. And in that moment, the gravity of my actions hit me like a tidal wave. I had misused the platform I was given to deny the truth. The vision then deepened, and I saw something that pierced my soul, the eternal consequences of intellectual pride. All my academic achievements, all my honors, all the praise I had received, they had become idols, replacing God with human reason. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up, Jesus said gently, his voice filled with compassion. Your intelligence was meant to serve truth, not replace it. The vision unfolded further, revealing the intellectual darkness that had enveloped the scientific community. Despite our technological advances, we have gained knowledge but lost wisdom. We had learned how to manipulate the physical world, but we had no moral compass to guide us. Jesus pointed to this emptiness. Modern science asks, can we? But rarely, should we? Without divine guidance, he showed me, knowledge becomes dangerous, leading us to make decisions without consideration for eternity. Then came a profound revelation about the culture war I had been part of, a war I had seen as a pursuit of progress. But now, I saw with clarity, it was an assault on God's truth, orchestrated by forces that were not of this world. The battle isn't primarily political or cultural, Jesus said, it's spiritual and eternal. Souls are hanging in the balance. I saw how my public advocacy for progressive causes, what I had viewed as a fight for justice and equality, had contributed to a weakening of the very foundations that God had established for human flourishing. My influence had normalized behaviors that I now understood led people further away from the truth. You thought you were liberating people, Jesus said, his voice tinged with sadness, but you were helping to construct spiritual prisons. The vision continued, and I was shown the impact of my scientific work on the next generation of thinkers. Young researchers, inspired by my example, had embraced a worldview that left no room for God. They followed your path, Jesus said, but they were unaware that it led them away from the ultimate truth. I could feel the weight of that realization. My legacy was one of spiritual blindness. My research papers, my lectures, my public stances, they had shaped a generation of minds, leading them to reject the very truth that could set them free. Then came a revelation that struck at the very heart of my scientific pride. I had long believed that my materialistic explanations for life were the only logical conclusions, but now I saw how inadequate they truly were. Jesus showed me the true nature of the human soul, how it wasn't some byproduct of brain chemistry or neural activity, as I had once thought. The soul isn't an emergent property of brain function, he said. It's a divine gift that transcends physical reality. I could feel my scientific worldview shattering. The way I had interpreted my findings, and the conclusions I had drawn, all felt so shallow in the light of this truth. He showed me how my advocacy for scientific materialism, the very thing I had built my career on, had rippled out to create a culture of unbelief. My words and my research have influenced countless others, colleagues, students, and readers of my work. Your words carried weight in academic circles, Jesus said, his tone heavy with sorrow, but they led people away from eternal truth. The realization that I had been a vessel for such darkness, however well-intentioned, was overwhelming. And yet, even in the face of my failures, there was still a glimmer of hope, a call to repentance, a chance to change the course of my life. But the price of that redemption seemed impossibly high, the weight of my responsibility so much greater than I had ever imagined. The vision continued to unfold, showing me the true purpose of scientific inquiry. Rather than seeking to disprove God, genuine science was meant to reveal His glory and wisdom. Every breakthrough, every discovery, should have pointed to His greatness, drawing me and others into worship. Instead, I had used my work to cast doubt on His existence, leading others into darkness. Jesus spoke gently but firmly, saying, "Every discovery should have led to worship, but you led them to promote doubt." Then He showed me how many of the groundbreaking discoveries I thought were mine were, in reality, just subtle revelations of truths that had already been written in His Word. I had believed I was pioneering new territory, uncovering knowledge that had never been known. But He revealed that I was simply uncovering what He had already designed. "You thought you were forging new paths," He said, "but you were merely discovering what I had already laid before you." That revelation was humbling. How arrogant I had been to think that I was the source of such wisdom when all along it had been His. As the visions continued, Jesus laid before me a series of choices, each with eternal consequences, not only for me but for countless others whose lives I would influence. He said, "If you return, you must choose. You must choose between continuing your current path or using your gifts to serve my truth." Two futures were shown to me. In one, I continued my research and advocacy, pushing forward with the same ideas that had led so many away from God. On the other, I used my scientific knowledge and academic position to point people toward the truth of God's creation. The cost would be high, Jesus warned me. Many in academia would reject me. Some would call me a traitor to science. I saw visions of future lectures, where instead of defending materialistic evolution, I would present evidence for intelligent design. I saw myself writing papers acknowledging divine agency in creation. "Your credentials won't be revoked," He reassured me, "but your reputation in secular academia will suffer." And then, with a tenderness that pierced my heart, He showed me something even more challenging: my relationship with Damien. "If you choose to follow me fully," Jesus said, "you will need to end this relationship. You must embrace God's design for sexuality and marriage." He continued, His voice a mixture of love and sorrow, "This will be your hardest test. But you cannot serve two masters." I saw the pain this decision would cause, not just for Damien and me, but for our friends and supporters in the LGBTQ+ community. Many would see it as a betrayal, as internalized homophobia, as giving in to religious bigotry. "Remember," Jesus said gently, "temporary pain is better than eternal regret." Then He showed me the ripple effects of both choices. If I chose to continue my current path, my influence would lead more young scientists away from faith, contributing to a growing culture of atheistic materialism in academia. "Your words carry authority," He explained. "They can either build my kingdom or work against it." But if I chose to follow Him fully, my testimony could have a powerful impact. A former gay scientist who had encountered the living Christ, my story would challenge both scientific materialism and progressive ideology. "Many are secretly questioning their choices," he said. "They need someone with your background to show them the way home." The vision expanded, showing me specific individuals who would be impacted by my decision. Students struggling with their faith in science classes, researchers questioning materialistic explanations, and people wrestling with unwanted same-sex attractions. These souls, Jesus showed me, were waiting for truth spoken in love. "Your experience uniquely positions you to reach them," He said, "because they need someone who understands both worlds, science and faith." Rather than abandoning my scientific training, He showed me how it could be redirected to reveal God's glory. The same analytical skills I had used to defend evolution could now be used to demonstrate evidence of intelligent design. "Science itself isn't the enemy," He clarified. "It's the materialistic philosophy that has hijacked it." Jesus then revealed something profound about sacrifice. What seemed like losing everything, my career, my reputation, my relationship, my community standing, was gaining something far greater. "Those who lose their life for my sake will find it," He said. True fulfillment comes through surrender to me. At that moment, I understood that the pain of sacrifice would be far outweighed by the joy of following him fully. The vision deepened further, showing me future scenes where I spoke at conferences, not just about science, but about the intersection of faith, sexuality, and scientific truth. My unique background would open doors that were closed to others. You'll face opposition, Jesus warned me, but your testimony will set many free. He then showed me how my expertise in molecular biology could be used to demonstrate the impossibility of random evolution producing the complex systems I'd studied. The machinery of life bears my signature, he said. You've been studying my technology without acknowledging the technologist. The depth of that truth washed over me. The same systems I had once seen as products of chance were, in fact, evidence of God's intelligent design. In this vision, the decision before me became clear: to follow Jesus fully, to embrace the truth of his creation, and to use my gifts for his glory. It would be a costly decision, but the rewards would be eternal. This vision was reshaping everything I thought I knew about science, identity, and purpose. Jesus was showing me that my colleagues, though publicly committed to materialistic explanations, secretly harbored doubts. They feared professional ostracism if they questioned the dominant worldview. The academic world has become hostile to my truth, Jesus explained, but cracks are appearing in the materialistic facade. Then he revealed something deeply personal: my relationship with Damien. Though meaningful, it prevented me from experiencing the deeper spiritual intimacy I was designed for. Human relationships can become idols, Jesus said. They can substitute for the divine relationship I offer. This truth pierced me. Had I allowed my need for companionship to override my need for God? The vision expanded further, exposing the nature of true identity. What I had always thought was my authentic self, my sexual orientation, my scientific materialism, was a false identity that had kept me from my true purpose. Identity is found in me, Jesus declared, not in sexuality, not in career, not in human achievement. I saw future scenes of ministry, reaching not just the academic world but churches and support groups. My testimony would become a bridge between faith communities and those struggling with sexual identity. Many feel trapped between two worlds, he explained. Your story will show them the path to freedom. Then Jesus showed me the purpose of my scientific reputation. Though my credibility would suffer initially, it would ultimately serve a greater calling. Your credibility wasn't given to you to promote unbelief, he said. It was to prepare you for this moment of truth. I saw myself speaking at universities, presenting evidence for intelligent design. Students' eyes opened as they realized science did not require rejecting God. Many are seeking permission to believe, Jesus explained. Your background gives you authority to grant that permission. The vision deepened, revealing the potential ripple effects of scientific papers I could write. Papers that demonstrated how genetics and molecular biology supported biblical creation. The evidence has always pointed to me, Jesus said. It just needs honest interpreters. Then he pulled back the curtain on something I had long suspected but never fully confronted: the spiritual warfare within academia. I saw how materialistic philosophy, not scientific evidence, often determined what got published in peer-reviewed journals. Grant committees, research institutions, and tenure processes were often shaped by ideological biases. The system seems overwhelming, Jesus acknowledged, but I am greater than the system. He then showed me how my experience with same-sex attraction would allow me to speak the truth with compassion. Unlike some Christians who have never faced these struggles, I would deeply understand the emotional weight of these issues. Your weakness becomes strength in my hands, Jesus said. Your struggle becomes a bridge to reach others. My testimony would impact multiple groups: secular scientists who secretly doubted evolution, Christians wrestling with same-sex attraction, students torn between faith and science. Each group needs what you'll offer, he said. Scientific credibility combined with personal experience and spiritual truth. Jesus then showed me how my research lab could become a place where young scientists learn to pursue truth without compromising faith. Instead of Christian students feeling pressured to conform to materialistic worldviews, I could equip them to integrate faith and science. Science and faith aren't enemies, Jesus said. They are both paths to truth when properly understood. Then I saw something even more powerful: how my transformation would affect the LGBTQ+ community. While many would initially react with anger, some would be deeply moved. Many in that community are secretly unhappy, Jesus said. They're waiting for permission to question their choices. Finally, I saw books I would write, works that combine scientific expertise with personal testimony. These books would reach an audience that neither pure science books nor traditional Christian books could. Your unique journey creates unique opportunities, Jesus said. Few can speak to both worlds as you will. He then showed me how my background in genetics would allow me to discuss biological factors related to sexuality, without using them to justify choices that contradict God's design. Science describes, Jesus said. It doesn't prescribe. The vision was clear. I had a choice to make. Would I continue down the path of intellectual pride and self-defined identity, or would I surrender everything? My career, my reputation, my relationships, for the sake of truth? The cost was great, but the reward was eternal. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. The clarity of my vision from Jesus stayed with me even as the physical pain of recovery set in. The hospital room, the beeping of machines, the smell of antiseptic. Everything was real, but it felt almost like a distant memory compared to the spiritual reality I had just experienced. Damien's voice, thick with emotion, brought me back to the present moment, but it also reminded me of the immense cost of what I was about to do. When I explained to Damien that I could no longer continue our relationship, his reaction was expected but still gut-wrenching. He was hurt and angry, accusing me of abandoning him, and questioning whether I was truly healed or just delusional. I understood why he felt that way. I had not only broken his heart but also shattered the framework of beliefs and ideals we had built together. But deep down, I knew this was not about just our relationship. It was about something far greater. The choice I was making was a matter of eternal consequence, not just for me, but for all those whose lives I could impact through my testimony. Jesus had shown me that my unique position, with my scientific background and experience with same-sex attraction, gave me an extraordinary platform to reach people who were caught in the tension between science, faith, and sexuality. As the days passed in the hospital, recovering from my physical injuries, I felt a growing urgency within me. My transformation wasn't just an individual one. It had a larger purpose. The vision had shown me how my testimony would challenge the popular narrative that change was impossible, particularly regarding sexual orientation. It would show people that true change was not only possible but promised through a relationship with Christ. The world had conditioned us to believe that being born this way meant staying that way, but Jesus was offering something far greater: the power of new birth in him, a radical transformation. I thought about the countless young scientists, like the ones Jesus had shown me, who struggled with their faith in the face of a materialistic academic world. How many of them were secretly questioning evolution or grappling with same-sex attraction, but felt trapped, unable to reconcile their beliefs with their reality? These were the souls I was now being called to reach. And it wasn't just in my relationships. Jesus had shown me that my work in the academic world, my expertise in genetics, could be redirected to demonstrate that the scientific evidence supported divine creation, not random chance. My work could reveal the design behind life's complexities and help others see the Creator's fingerprints in the world around them. But the journey wouldn't be easy. Jesus had warned me of the cost: the immediate rejection, the pain of breaking relationships, the challenge of speaking out in a world that preferred silence or conformity. Yet in the depths of my spirit, I felt peace. I knew I was on the path he had shown me, one that would not only lead to my healing but also to the healing of others. The grace he had given me was sufficient for every obstacle that lay ahead. As I continued recovering physically, I decided to start speaking out about my experience. It wasn't just a personal transformation. It was a message that had the power to reach those who felt trapped by their struggles, whether in academia, in relationships, or their sexuality. The healing I had experienced, both physical and spiritual, was the catalyst for the change I needed to make. I had a responsibility to use my story to help others find their way to the truth I had encountered. The journey I've walked in the years since that near-death experience has been nothing short of extraordinary. Coming back to academia felt like stepping into a world I no longer recognized, even though it was familiar. I had once been driven by the pursuit of scientific prestige and the validation of my materialistic worldview, but now I was fundamentally changed. I began the painful yet necessary process of withdrawing several papers that, while sound in terms of data, had been rooted in a framework that denied the existence of a creator. My colleagues couldn't understand it at first. To them, my abrupt shift in perspective seemed like the result of trauma or brain injury. They couldn't reconcile the person they had known with the one I had become. Despite their confusion, something beautiful began to unfold. Slowly, one by one, students began to approach me, cautiously at first, to discuss their internal struggles. They, too, were questioning the dominant narrative of materialistic evolution. Researchers, who had quietly harbored doubts about the sufficiency of naturalistic explanations for the complexities they observed, came to me with questions about intelligent design. These conversations were more than I could have ever expected. I had gone from being a proponent of the very worldview that had alienated their faith to a trusted resource for those seeking answers. I realized that my testimony had a power I never anticipated. It was a bridge for others who felt trapped between their faith and their academic pursuits. Now, 5 years later, my role at the university has changed. While I still conduct research, it's no longer about defending the materialistic view I once held. My work now highlights the astonishing engineering behind biological systems. Systems that, in my old framework, I would have dismissed as the product of random chance. Each discovery I make now speaks not just to scientific principles but to the wisdom of a creator who designed these systems with purpose and intent. I've published new papers that embrace intelligent design, all while maintaining the scientific rigor I was trained in. I still remember the skepticism and fear that came with taking those first steps, wondering if my colleagues would dismiss my work as religious propaganda. But the evidence speaks for itself, and with every paper, I see the doors of understanding opening wider. One of the most meaningful changes has been the creation of a support group for scientists and academics who are grappling with questions of faith, sexuality, and identity. Many of them, like me, felt alone in their struggles, fearing that embracing faith would mean abandoning their intellectual rigor. Now, they have a space where they can find both truth and grace, where they can pursue scientific integrity without sacrificing their belief in God. I never would have imagined that the very credentials that once gave me the authority to lead people away from God would now lend weight to my testimony about the transforming power of Christ. Of course, the cost has been significant. I lost many friends who couldn't reconcile my new beliefs with the person I used to be. I forfeited my place in the LGBTQ+ community, and I faced professional challenges as colleagues distanced themselves from my newfound views. The price of my decision has been high, but I found something far greater: the peace that comes from living in alignment with the truth and the joy of seeing others come to faith through my story. I still study molecular biology, but now it's not just a field of academic curiosity. It's a lens through which I can marvel at the intricate designs woven into the very fabric of life. What was once a field of blind chance is now an arena of divine wonder. My work still has the same rigor, but my heart is filled with awe at the wisdom of the Creator who fashioned the universe with purpose. To those who knew me before, it may seem like I've fallen into delusion. To them, my transformation may appear as a tragic loss of intellectual rigor, a surrender to something that undermines my previous achievements. But in reality, it's the most profound awakening I could have ever experienced. The truth is clearer now than ever before, and I wouldn't trade it for all the prestige and recognition I once sought. The world of academia may view me as a fool, but I've seen the truth, and it's more beautiful than anything I could have ever imagined. And that brings us to the end of this incredible journey of transformation, truth, and purpose. Through everything I've shared, I hope you've seen how science and faith don't have to be enemies, how our identities are ultimately found in Christ, and how the pursuit of truth, no matter the cost, is always worth it. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What is one thing you've learned from this story that resonated with you? More importantly, how will you apply it in your own life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to read them. If you enjoyed this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more thought-provoking content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.